We're here in the area for this. I'm Kristen Estes, and this is Lakeshore Report. Calling Medicaid a bureaucratic and fiscal monstrosity, Governor Mike Pence this week announced his plans to advance private market-based Medicaid reforms in Indiana with HIP 2.0 healthcare coverage for uninsured Hoosiers. Pence, a staunch opponent of the Affordable Care Act, has refused to set up state exchanges and has made it clear that Indiana has no intention of expanding Medicaid. The governor says growing the Healthy Indiana plan will help close the coverage gap that prevents almost 350,000 Hoosiers from getting access to quality health insurance.
HIP 2.0 takes consumer-driven Medicaid reform to the next level by replacing traditional Medicaid in Indiana for all able-bodied adults and offering instead a healthcare culture in our state that's built on healthy, cost-conscious decision-making.
The HIP expansion would impact Hoosiers at 138% of the federal poverty level and, among other things, give incentives for increased preventative care. To find out more about HIP 2.0, go to www.hip.in.gov. One local hospital is doing some expanding of its own. On Wednesday, St. Mary Medical Center in Hobart officially launched construction of its new surgical pavilion and intensive care unit. The $40 million addition to the hospital will be a 4-story building with over 100,000 square feet of space. The hospital CEO, Janice Ryba, says the addition was designed in part by physicians and hospital staff in order to maximize functionality and efficiency. Hobart Mayor Brian Snedecor praised the project, adding that planned road improvements will further enhance the area.
The final phase of 61st Avenue, it's about a $14 million project, is going to be, we'll see construction on that next spring. So it works well timing-wise, and I think that it shows the cooperation of the hospital and the city working together for our citizens.
The building will be the largest addition to the hospital in more than 10 years and is expected to open late next year. Despite the rainy weather, Indiana State Police troopers gathered outside the Lowell headquarters Tuesday morning to continue a somber tradition. Each May, State Police honor their fellow officers who have died in the line of duty by reading the names of the fallen and placing a wreath at the entrance to the police post. Since the department was formed in 1933, 46 troopers across the state have died while serving their communities. One of the names read was David Rich, a 19-year veteran of the Indiana State Police Force who was shot while assisting a stranded motorist in 2007. His brother Robert also works for the Indiana State Police. He says the ceremony does more than honor the fallen. Rich says it also gives the public an opportunity to recognize the importance of police work. This year's ceremony also honored a police canine, Kilo, who was fatally shot while protecting human officers in southern Indiana last June. The Indiana State Board of Education this week approved a revision to the adjunct teacher's permit first adopted in 2012. The career specialist license would allow high school administrators the flexibility to consider hiring non-teachers who have a minimum of 6,000 hours of professional work experience in the subject to be taught. The amendment would require those applicants to begin teacher education training once hired in order to be granted the career specialist license. Proponents of the revision say it's an important amendment to the adjunct teacher's permit, which required a bachelor's degree but did not require any formal training in education. Career specialist hires would be subject to administrative decision-making and annual teacher evaluations. The provision will be included in the State Board of Education's final rulemaking adoption for teacher licensure in June. The State Board of Education has also been busy revamping state standards for Indiana students. Education advocate Tony Lux stopped by the Lakeshore Studios to discuss Indiana's pass on Common Core with our own Steve Walsh.
With the recent passage of new state standards, Indiana teachers will have some homework to do this summer as they prepare to implement a new curriculum in time for students to return in the fall. To talk about it, we have retired Maryville Superintendent Tony Lux, who's become an education advocate. Tony, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So we've heard about a certain amount of controversy over whether or not Indiana would adopt the Common Core. Eventually, they just sort of adopted their own standards. We might talk about that a little later, but in the meantime, What are teachers up against this fall? This is a very tight time frame. New standards, they're going to have new lesson plans all in time for this fall. What are they going to do?
Well, there is a lot to do for teachers and school systems to implement these standards for next year. Part of the dilemma, though, is that they're still being tested on the old Indiana standards, and so they have to simultaneously make new curricula calendars for the coming school year while they're still maintaining emphasis on what they're being tested on.
Because they're still at least a year away from replacing the old I-STEP test, so they're going to have basically both things out there at the same time. How is that going to work? I mean, how are they going to do that?
Well, you know, teachers are used to working under pressure and under difficult situations, but it's going to be summer work by select committees of teachers, I think, in most school systems, because the other side of it is that, you know, there's no specific funding for this. School systems have had, on the spur of the moment, have to budget now to bring teachers in to make these curricular timeline adjustments and emphasis for next year.
So how different is this? We've heard all sorts of things, even the comedian Louis C.K. coming on social media talking about how he can't teach his kids math anymore because Common Core is so much different from what he's used to as a kid. How different will this be?
You know, I think it's more of an emphasis on what's taught in math, more emphasis on problem solving, more emphasis on analytics, graphing, and so on, and being able to explain answers as opposed to saying that there's a new formula for doing multiplication.
Why change? What's the rationale? Why change at all? We've been teaching math and English at, you know, this kind of the same way for a very long time. What's the incentive?
Well, the ultimate concept is to have U.S. students be more competitive on international standards, as well as to have students more college and career ready when they graduate from high school. And that's what raising the standards is all about.
What do you think? Why do you think Indiana ultimately decided to drop out of Common Core after it had advocated Common Core, been one of the early states?
There is no good educational explanation for that. There is nothing wrong with Common Core. For some reason, I think it's a reaction against not wanting to go along with a federal initiative, and nothing much more than that.
Superintendent Tony Lux, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
First built to house factory workers nearly a century ago, abandoned homes and blighted buildings now dot one unique Northwest Indiana community. Marktown, Indiana, with its old world architecture, sits in the shadows of the BP Whiting refinery. Some residents are fighting to keep their historic footprint amid BP's recent expansion.
Yeah, it was a great place to grow up when we were young.
Family photographs keep Nancy Fink linked to her history in Marktown, Indiana. It's a history that spans
65 years. In fact, I live in the house that I was brought home from the hospital when I was born. See, this is my mom, my dad, this is my brother.
She gathered with a different family at the Marktown Community Center Thursday night, her neighbors.
What I'm asking you is to help us move forward.
It was the first meeting for residents to plan action since demolition started Monday on pastel, picturesque buildings recently sold to BP's Whiting refinery. BP officials say about 50 Marktown residents want to sell their homes for a project to make more green space around the steel structure.
Well, I got the flyers out today as fast as I could.
Residents say BP should have held community meetings first. BP spokesperson Scott Dean says the company is working with the city's building department to ensure residents know project plans.
We've worked very hard to try to disrupt or to not disrupt their lives as we undergo this demolition activity. It's completely voluntary, and we are in no way attempting to force or coerce homeowners to sell their homes.
Marktown has held on to its hamlet houses, designed by architect Howard Van Doren Shaw, amid industrial neighbors on all four sides. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places, but the structures demolished this week were private property and not protected. Resident Kim Rodriguez says the community should be restored, not destroyed.
We are important. We have heritage here. We have history. Get the city to realize that as a historic community, we need to stay here, and they need to help us stay here.
Tiny Marktown is only about 300 residents large. Supporters of this group say this issue is greater than the region, so they've taken their fight online, starting a Facebook fan page called Save Marktown.
They'll see that Marktown is important, not only for the residents that live here, but for our community. We need it to grow instead of be torn down.
We are hearing a lot of support for your town in Chicago.
Ward Miller of Preservation Chicago says his group is going beyond its usual Chicago borders to help Marktown.
We know that there's things like facade easements where you can give a facade of a historic house to a state agency, and there's several of those in this area.
Residents say it's the city that should do more. In a call from the mayor's office, East Chicago Mayor Anthony Copeland confirms he was not invited to the meeting. He says, quote, no one in this group has asked for any other future meetings.
I would like to see Marktown stay here, you know. I would like for it to be remodeled and the people be able to keep their homes.
There might be a picture of, not a picture of me so much as when I was born.
Fink says for the community where neighbors are often relatives, a viable plan for restoration from the city's Common Council could give the area, so reminiscent of the past, a future.
If we could just like refurbish everything, people would come back here like to live just like before.
Marktown residents plan to rally against further demolition in Marktown Park on Saturday. Well, while some Hoosiers are working to hold on to their history, others are determined to create their own future. Sarah Holst has that story.
Thanks, Hillary. The National Federation of Independent Business conducts a small business optimism survey each month. And in April, small business owners reported the highest level of optimism since 2007. But in a post-recession economy with potential increases in the cost of healthcare and energy bills, some entrepreneurs are questioning if the time is right for starting a new business. I spoke with a local small business expert to hear his advice on turning a dream into a day job. It's a constant topic of debate among lawmakers.
The plan to put Americans back to work, we're going to create more jobs, more opportunity.
Real progress on jobs.
According to the Indiana Small Business Development Center, small businesses create 64% of net new private sector jobs. And for workers who have lost their job or been unable to find work, the idea of starting a new business may seem appealing. But according to business advisor Bill Gregory, the dream and the reality are not always the same.
It is not like having a 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5. It's not having a job where you get a regular vacation every year. It's not a job where you get every weekend off. It's not a job where you necessarily get a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks.
As part of the Northwest Indiana Small Business Development Center team, Gregory works with entrepreneurs to help them start, maintain, and grow their businesses. During a recent Launch Your Own Business workshop, he advised participants considering owning a business to begin with a 3-point analysis of their idea.
What we could call the 3 M's. Management, market, and money. And so in that whole management area, you really have to assess whether you have the skills, abilities, demeanor, traits, plug in any word you want there to start your own business.
The second M, market, has 2 aspects. Entrepreneurs should know the type of consumer their business will appeal to and be knowledgeable about their particular type of business.
What's out there that you can do differently, faster, easier? In that whole marketplace, what can you offer as a competitive advantage to anybody else? Do you know that market? So if you've had no experience in the restaurant field, for instance, you want to open a restaurant, that may mean that it's not a good time for you. Maybe you need to do a little more research, or maybe there's another business that you could think about getting engaged in.
The third M is perhaps the most obvious and most challenging: money.
Do you have the financial resources to be able to do this? It doesn't mean that you have to have all of the capital to start up your business, but it certainly means you have to have a substantial chunk of it. Most lenders would say they're looking for 20 to 25% of the startup costs to come from the business owner. And so that's a large, depending upon the nature of the business and how big and how much the startup costs are, could be a large piece of money.
Gregory says banks are beginning to lend more than in recent years, but that doesn't mean the criteria for business loans has relaxed. He says a well-crafted business plan is necessary for most loans, but can also act like a GPS, guiding the business into the future.
It shows you where you're going, and it helps you think about how to get there.
Gregory reminds potential business owners that no matter what the economic conditions are currently, starting a business is always hard work. But with the right approach, becoming your own boss can be a reality.
If you've got a good idea, you have researched that, you've got the passion for it, you've got the personal ability and sort of traits that are required to be in that, yeah, you can be successful in a business. And we start businesses all the time, or help start businesses all the time. So.
The Launch Your Own Business Workshop will be offered again on June 10th in Valparaiso. Up next, John Kane has details on an event that not only celebrates art, but also provides greater access to art education for children in Northwest Indiana in this week's edition of Eye on the Arts.
Hi, joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is my co-worker, Tricia Hernandez, Director of Marketing and Development at South Shore Arts, where we have worked these many years.
Yes, these many years.
At the Art Center in Munster.
Definitely.
Yes.
And I'm here to talk about our biggest, largest, wonderful fundraiser, the Beaux-Arts Ball.
Basically.
Yeah, the
really.
only big fundraiser. It's the 21st. You've been there for all 21.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, I invented it as a little
yes,
boy.
As a little boy.
It came to me in the night.
And it's Friday, June 6th.
Yes.
It's always the first Friday in June.
Yep.
And it's Hello Dolly. This year is our theme. Cute.
D-A-L-I.
Yes, D-A-L-I. And so we're having some fun with that, but most importantly, it raises money for our kids program, which is our Every Kid program. And continually, we reach like 28,000 kids. So we've grown that from, 45 kids in
30 to 40 the first year.
Right.
1995.
1995 to now 28,000. So we're all really proud of that.
So it's not every kid, but it's almost every kid.
It's almost every kid.
It's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of kids, and we'd love it to be every kid. So
sure.
We are looking for auction donations, just flat out. It's a great way for us to raise money during this time for our education programs for kids, and come to the ball. So there's lots of ways that you can support us, but it is a big event. We always have a really good time.
Or if you have a timeshare.
Oh, if you do.
If you do, please call us at once.
Call me. The number's on the screen.
Yeah, that would be a really fun thing to be able to auction live.
Yes.
That's the kind of stuff we need.
We actually have a really cool live auction item, and it is Elliot from Art Beat Live, and he does performance art. And he's been around the area and been on TV many times, and he's gonna wow the audience.
And that's apropos because there's a documentary about Dolly that was made in 1965. I just watched it, and he does performance art towards the end of it, and so we can have that on the screen, during dinner time.
Well, that's a good idea.
There's also a part where somebody slices an eyeball open,
but
we won't use that. No.
But come to the ball, support the ball. We appreciate anything that people can do.
Think of Carol Channing with Dolly's mustache. That's our theme this year.
It is.
Yeah, that's fun. Okay, thank you for being here to tell us
about it.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts.
If you'd like to get up close and personal with some legends of the American West, you only need to travel as far as Hobart, Indiana. We visited Broken Wagon Bison on this week's Jump in the Lake. This is a family farm. The Cabin Farm has been in your family for how many generations?
3 generations.
And you were farming all that time, and at some point you converted to bison. When was that and why?
We started in 2003. We're a small family grain farm, 160 acres, and for a grain farm, that's like puny. I mean, that's just nothing. So if we're going to lose money, let's lose money on something a little more interesting. So in 2003, we started building fence and bought our first animals in the fall.
What ultimately inspired you to go down this path?
Well, it's an American icon. It's such a unique animal.
I mean, we're standing about 3 feet up or so, and they're still
3 foot higher.
Really imposing.
What they're grazing on out here is cereal ryegrass. This is actually bean stubble we're on right now. We have 60-acre field. It's half corn and half soybeans every year. And they travel this field 3 times a day between eating hay. They don't travel this field 3 times a day to see if anything grew. Come here, good girl. No, she don't have it. I do.
I got a little bison lick there.
Oh, yeah, you can get a slobber on you. Now, she's kind of funny. I wouldn't reach out and touch her.
I won't reach out and touch her, but she did lick me.
If you do this, she shakes her head at you. She don't like that. But she won't leave.
Every once in a while, we are actually moving here, and I know it's because we got
on
some
the
guy
tractor,
over there pushing the tractor.
He likes to scratch on that tractor. As long as he keeps his horn out of that tire, we're good.
I mean, the whole thing is moving.
Oh, it's a good scratching post. He's got nothing else to scratch on out here.
You have a store here on the premises.
Yes, we try to utilize as much of the buffalo as we can using bison leather products, and we even sell teeth.
But that's only one part of the store. There's a big part of the store over this way,
Well,
and that's
the meat part's over on this end of the store.
meat products.
If you really want the best taste of bison, you want to try a steak. But it's easy to ruin a bison steak because it cooks so fast.
And is that because the fat content
The
is
fat
so
content
low?
is so low.
Is there anything here that we can taste? Okay. Okay, so this is... Okay, now this isn't even jerky as I think of. This is a lot more tender.
It's a higher moisture level.
But it still does have an underlying sweetness to it.
Yeah. Well, the meat alone has a sweetness to it.
I had so much fun shooting
Really
that.
neat.
It was very cool. The animals are a bit intimidating because they're quite large and very powerful, and you are really up close. You're out in the fields with them, so even though you're elevated and protected in kind of a tractor pull, I don't know, it's a wagon, I guess, you're still really, really close to these big animals. And it was cold. They do tours May through September. On Saturdays, you can just walk in and go see the bison, but hopefully it'll be warmer soon.
Now, bison, buffalo, are we talking about the same thing? Is that a different species?
You know, they're commonly called buffalo, and if you say American buffalo, everybody knows what you're talking about, but technically it's bison. They say that early settlers coming over saw the animals and compared them to, for instance, water buffalo, and equated them to the same species, and they are not. So bison is a separate thing entirely. By the way, if you'd like to see more about that story, and if any of the stories that we had in Lakeshore Report, you can go to www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org.
That's right. And we do want to hear from you. We'd like to hear what you think of our stories. If you have ideas for stories or any kind of feedback, you can send that to tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Again, we encourage you to share what you think about our programming or what you'd like to see on our station in the future. So please open up and tell us what you think.
Yeah, it's true. We're always looking for story ideas here, and we want people from Northwest Indiana to participate in our programming as much as possible. This is public broadcasting, after all.
And they can also tweet us at Lakeshore Report on our Twitter page. So we also definitely are looking to hear from people there as well.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on Lakeshore Report. We hope to see you back here next week.